Day to you. God bless you. Say welcome to the Shepherd's Chapel. Welcome to this family Bible study hour. We're ready to get back into our Father's Word. Rachel, having taken the teraphims of her fathers for the gold content, not for the idol properties of it, has just a little deception or a little deceit overcome a little deceit with her father, because she put it under the saddle, her camel saddle. We called it a beanbag yesterday, but it was a camel hair saddle, very comfortable, a lady's saddle, and he let it pass for fear of polluting himself, which was law of all those peoples at that time. So she pulls it off, but remember, it was very serious, that Jacob stated, that if someone took it, then let them not live. Mark that. Okay, so we pick it up in chapter 31, verse 35, and let's go with it, and it reads, verse 36, and it reads, and Jacob was wroth and code, which is to say he was angry with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, "What is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me?" Now, as a criminal, basically, he's ticked. The Kola has risen, and he's served this man for 14 now, almost 20 years, and he has never taken from him. And when he comes charging out on a bunch of wild camels, and they were, he's not happy. And now that I'm sure it would have cooled him considerably had he known what Rachel was sitting on, but be that as it may, he didn't. He was innocent of it. He's going to let off a little steam. Verse 37. Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. In other words, if you found something we've stolen, put it right there. Verse 38. And he continues, this 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flocks have I not eaten. In other words, anytime there was a stillborn, I suffered the cost of it. I never allowed anything like that to be marked up to your charge. And certainly I've never eaten any of your livestock, 39. That which was torn of beast I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. This word stolen in the Hebrew is ganab, and it means basically to come away or to fall away, not the stolen like we would translate in English. 40. Thus I said, in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. In other words, it was cold on the desert in those nights, and certainly it was hot in the daytime. And he said, I stayed out there for you all that time, and it was hard, the hardships. 41. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years. 14 meaning what? Deliverance. 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. And of course 10 means testimony in biblical numerics, but 20, let me think just a second, 20 means it's impending disappointment, and kind of it falls in place here. Verse 42, except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away, now empty. In other words, God has seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. He made it clear to you. In other words, Jacob is reminding himself as well as Laban, God's with me, and you know it. Because when I came, you had nothing, not a hardly. And with his knowledge and wisdom in animal husbandry, but most of all, beloved, because God was with him. God told him to go there, God told him when to leave, and God blessed him in all of his endeavors, giving him knowledge on how to do most things. And, so it is. Do you realize that our Heavenly Father, even for this day, that written in these scriptures are the success of any business, even down to agriculture. The best farming methods in the world are written right in this word. They've been here all the time. The best policy for counsel in your family to keep it together is written in this word. You'll never find better counsel. And so it was that God counseled Jacob, watching over him, providing for him, protecting him. So there's no different today. God will to this day watch over you. As a matter of fact, as I stated in the last or time before, He will never leave thee nor forsake thee. It's always with you, watching out, watching over. You don't really have that much to worry about as long as you do your homework. But your homework and your effort must be put forth, or He will never recognize you. Okay, so let's go with the next verse, verse 43. And it reads, And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, These daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle. Actually, they're not. The daughters he sold. The cattle, he paid them in wages. And these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? He's softening a little bit here because he knows how that Yahweh blesses Jacob. And what he's saying here, how do you think I could possibly hurt one of my own kin? What are you accusing me of? He's slick, all right? But still at the same time, he had that one bit of goodness within him, as all people have some good in them, hopefully. And so he's simply saying, how could I harm my own children? Verse 44. Now therefore come thou, and let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for the witness between me and thee. Let it always remind us. 45. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. 46. And Jacob said unto his brethren, Gather stones. And they took stones and made an heap. They did eat there upon the heap. They ate the covenant sacrifice there after it was completed. 47, let's get the title of it, and then we'll discuss it just a little bit. And Laban called it Jigar Shehadutha, and Jacob called it Gilead. Now, this tells you a little bit about the men, because it's the same, they both mean the same thing, only it's in two languages. One in Chaldee, or the Babylonian tongue, and the other in the Hebrew tongue, and they both say the witness heap. But it means a little more than that. It's kind of like the, as you're going to find out, it's kind of like a boundary between them that they're not to cross for harm. And as they make this vow, then certainly, inasmuch as they are kin, then certainly it means a great deal. Thus, the covenant sacrifice, that they shake on it as we would do in this generation, or I suppose in this generation we would have 2 lawyers and 2 public notaries, and notary publics rather, and maybe no telling what else, but be that as it may. But the fact that one speaks Chaldee when he names something of earnest, that is to say, in a legal sense, and the other the Hebrew tongue, does that tell you something? We see that Laban, because of the people that he lives among, has adopted some of their ways of thinking as well, and certainly the teraphim, that's to say the golden idols, document that. Verse 48. And Laban said, "This heap is a witness between me and thee this day." Therefore was the name of it called Gilead. And again, both meaning the same thing. 49, get this down. And Mizpah, that means a watchtower. For he said, "The Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from the other." This watchtower in the prime means to rigidly separate. All right? So there's a little bit of a vice. By vice, I mean a very binding contract that they're not going to attack each other or harm each other. 50. And thou shalt afflict my daughter, and thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. So he's kind of sewing up his own family lines here with his daughters, that they're well cared for, but at the same time, Laban being sharp, very sharp, he was quite a trader as far as bartering is concerned. 51. And Laban said to Jacob, "Behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee." 52. This heap be my witness, and this pillar be a witness, that I will not pass over this heap, here you see the boundary, to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. And there we see the point of the rigidity between them, that this was the place, here, this far and no more. And that's what the covenant amounted to. 53. And I find this very interesting. Here we have Laban talking. Here we have Laban that worships idol gods. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of who he's going to swear by, in other words, whatever you swear by is the strength of what your covenant is. He certainly doesn't swear by his the teraphim. Listen to this, 53. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, this would be Abraham's brother from which he was a descendant, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. And Jacob swear by the fear of his father Isaac. So we see that the family roots are carried all the way in documenting his, his pedigree, if you wish. That may sound a little crude to certain ears, but that's what it is in the prime Hebrew, that he was certainly not an Assyrian, but that he was an Edomite. Verse 54. Then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount, and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread, and tarried all night in the mount. And this is their goodbyes. 55. And early in the morning Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned into his place. I'm sure that Laban loved his children, but he had this trait about him that he was a controller. So in a sense, in as much as you've got Jacob here, which is a heel catcher, because he tried to keep his twin brother from being born first. That's why he was called the heel catcher, and or supplanter. In other words, you've got two people that are both pretty high geared, let's say, as far as bartering is concerned or leadership is concerned. So there would be considerable tension, in as much as Laban in his own land wanted to control everything. And of course, Jacob, with his blessings, now leaves him. What will happen to him now? Well, he will not be as blessed as he was, that's for certain. Chapter 32, verse 1. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Think about that. Angels of God. God had promised him he would be with him, so it should have been no surprise. Verse 2. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, which is to say the two hosts, or the two camps. Verse 3. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother, unto the land of Seir, which is to say hairy, which is what Esau's name means, the country of Edom, and of course Edom being red, and that being the name of and the color usually practiced by the nation of Esau even to this day. Now, I want you to think about this, and I want you to think about it real hard. I want you to put yourself, if you would, in Jacob's shoes. I want you to note that God loves him enough that he sent angels to instruct him, to guide him, has promised him, hey, I'll be with you. No problem. You're going to get blessed. Everything is going to work to your favor. Now, he's headed back home where he knows his brother has sworn to kill him. Now, if God promises you that he's going to be with you, what would you have done in that case? Would you have taken the preparations that Jacob's about to take? Well, I don't know. That's something that everyone must deal with themselves. But God will not apparently punish him for that. But in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, I think he was a little over careful, because I could almost see traits of, I don't want to use the word coward, because Jacob certainly wasn't a coward. But perhaps even on the other side of that coin, it could have been, to shed your own brother's blood is a terrible sin. And Jacob certainly wasn't going to lay down and let Esau kill him. So it's very possible that the reason he took all these precautions is that he would not want to slay his own brother. I don't know. But it is really, it brings to the surface a pop test for you. Something you can meditate upon and analyze your own self as to what you would do under these circumstances. Again, bearing in mind, God's giving him support deluxe. By that I mean, there can be no room for doubt in his mind, because God spoke to him personally and promised. He sends two of his host, angels, and yet, watch how careful, and again, in my own personal opinion, a little over careful, but who could know the reason? Well, I don't know. Jacob does. Let's go with it. All right, next verse, please. Verse 4. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall you speak unto my lord Esau. He's even calling him Lord. This is his brother. Now, that's not Lord like Almighty God. It's better said master. Well, Esau wasn't his master. Why would he say that? But he's really, I suppose maybe it shows us that it's showing his meekness. By that I mean how humble he is. My lord Esau, and say, Thy servant Jacob. Jacob wasn't his servant, but this was an over-polite way of approaching, all right? Thy servant Jacob said thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. In other words, that's the greeting when he returns. Well, as I say, that's a little overcautious for me, for my taste, but he did it. Verse 5. And I have oxen and asses, flocks, and men servants and women servants. And I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find grace in thy sight. 6. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he comes to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Wow! Now what does that mean? 400 soldiers? 400 what? What does this mean? Well, now, as wealthy as he was, certainly Jacob didn't have that kind of an army with him, people-wise. Verse 7. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and the camels into 2 bands. In other words, he's dividing the forces. Well, let's continue on. His reason is what kind of gets me, verse 8, and said, If Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. We're going to run. Well, again, that kind of goes against my grain, but that's how Jacob was handling it. Verse 9. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham. Now this is time to pray. It's when most people pray in their lives, when they're distressed and have feel that that only God can pull them forth. He goes out. And God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saith unto me, Return into thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal with thee. Verse 10. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercy, of thy mercies, of thee mercies rather, and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands. Well, now this is the part I have trouble with. I mean, fine, it's good tactics to split your forces, and in an attack, but he split them so one could run. And here, in a sense, in my mind from this, he's questioning God just a little bit. You told me to come back here, and look at me now. You might as well say, I think I'm about to die. Well, God promised him he would take care of him. I see a little bit of doubt in that, and yet Jacob's character will not align with that doubt, because before this chapter is finished, he's even going to wrestle with God. He wasn't a coward. Absolutely was not a coward. But I still sense just a little bit of doubt. Don't ever doubt God. That's dangerous. That's the point I want you to pick up on this. When God makes it very clear, when you've decided, hey, let's go for it, whatever that might fit or whatever that case might be, you go for it with vigor. All right? Now, there may be a time that you'll be bogged down and have to retreat. That's fine. No problem. But when you're going for it, you go for the victory. You don't go with any ifs, ands, or buts. If God has blessed you in a certain thing. Because I have always found in my life that once God makes it clear that something will succeed, then it always does. There's no giants that's going to come against you, because God, even if they be a giant before you arrive, they're going to be a squeaking midget when they leave. All right? God will see to it. So I see, after all that God has done for Jacob, a side here that would make me just a little bit uncomfortable. But then, does that sound like I'm saying I'm perfect? No. Maybe he took the right turn and I would be in error. But it still bothers me a little bit. And then, of course, I'm certainly not comparing myself to Jacob. But I don't know. As I said, I leave it to you. Kind of a pop test. What do you think? Verse 11. He continues his prayer. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children. Was he concerned for his children? Well, I could understand that. And fear is okay. Anytime before combat, there's fear. But I guess, what is the old saying? A coward dies 1,000,000 deaths, and a hero only dies once. Well, I don't know. It's fear and action. It's what you do in that fear that determines, and many times you're quite surprised in among men. Verse 12. And thou saidest, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Now you see, here is the part. He's acknowledging to God that God has made a covenant with Abraham, that through him, through Isaac, this one's father, and certainly it's not going to be through Esau, the brother that he's being afraid of at this time. It's certainly going to be through this one, Jacob. God made that promise. I can take that as nothing but doubting God, or being over careful because of his fear, because of what? I don't know. It's just a little mystery to me, and I suppose it lets us all know that in the flesh sometimes we do things a little too careful if you're not aggressive enough in your father's word. 13. And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother. Now we're going to try a little bribery. 14. 200 she-goats, and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams. 15. 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine, cattle, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. 16, and he delivered them unto the hand of his servants, even drove by themselves, every drove by himself, and said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. In other words, give me a little more time between drove and drove. Just give him what it takes, but not all at one time. I find that almost comical in a certain way. You can just see the wheels turning in old Jacob's mind here. He's got this all planned out. Well, what's Esau going to think when he sees half of those? Well, split them up. Hit him with half of them, and then if he's still coming, hit him with another bunch, and maybe it'll soften him up. 17. And he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Question 18. Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. There he goes again. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau. And behold, also, he is behind us. He's coming up. He's way behind us, you might say. Okay? Well, so again, Jacob continues presenting in this manner. Now, in my lifetime, and man does not change from that time to this, there is such a thing as being too lenient and too free and too open when there is about to be conflict. It is much better to show muscle than weakness. And to the average person, much of this would be looked upon not necessarily as love, but as weakness. And weakness, even in nature itself, among the prides of lions that hunt, they always seek out the weak, the easiest take. So I only add that, and it could upset some people, but I only add that for your own personal life, that I don't know that this would be the prime example to follow. You would just look too easy. And I'm not, again, I'm not knocking Jacob. He's their father. Hey, he did it this way. That's the point that somewhere along the way, he and I simply don't think alike. But was it worry of killing his own brother, shedding his own blood, family blood, that is to say, or losing his children who he loved and his wives whom he loved? I don't know. But there you have it. 19. And so commanded he the second and the third and all that followed the drove, saying, on this manner shall you speak unto Esau when you find him. 20. And say ye moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. And he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. I'll buy my way in there. 21. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. He sure didn't go up there. He sure didn't face it up. 22. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants, that's their maids, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. 23. And he took them and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. Now watch this, 24. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. Now we're going to save that for the next lecture. It just so happens that that man is Almighty God himself that he's wrestling with. So we cannot call him a coward. He's the only man that ever had the nerve to be a hill catcher, supplanter, won't quit, stubborn, won't quit, fought with him, wrestled with him all night long, until God himself finally had to throw his hip out of joint to get him to quit. And then he wouldn't quit until he received a blessing. So you would certainly be in error if you ever called him a coward. This is just one of those mysteries to me in studying mankind that I really have difficulty grasping what was in Jacob's mind as he fitted the group. I can only come to one conclusion, that he was trying to protect his family. And he certainly did not wish to kill his brother. Was it a little bit of guilt because of taking the heritage of Esau? Well, it was God's plan, not his. So naturally, God would have backed him. Did he know that? Of course, in a sense, he did, because his mother had told him. The promise was made to his mother. So it's just one of those things that I find interesting. But I wanted to assure you, don't ever make the mistake of calling Jacob a coward, because that he was not. We'll find out why in the next lecture. All right, bless your heart. You listen a moment.